Hi, I'm Mitch Gallagher. Welcome to the premiere episode of Sweetwater SoundCheck. In this new series of videos, we'll be talking about all sorts of gear topics. We'll be looking at new products, we'll be demonstrating products, we'll be doing some how-to to help you use your studio and live gear more effectively, and we've got lots more coming your way as well. Let's get started. Today we're checking out Avid's S3 control surface. Now the S3 can serve two purposes. You can hook it up to a venue system and use it as a control surface with your live rig, or you can take it into your studio and connect it up to your computer using the Yukon protocol. Now Yukon supports a variety of different DAWs. I'll be showing it running with Avid's Pro Tools today, but others are supported as well. The S3 actually comprises two different functions. Most obviously, it's a control surface. It has faders, knobs, buttons, switches, all of which address different functions inside your DAW software. But it's also an audio interface. It's a 4-in, 4-out audio interface that connects to your computer using AVB. Across the back panel of the S3, we have all of our connections for hooking up your computer, audio connections, and there are also two convenience connections for hooking up lights. Those are on the far left and on the far right of the console. We've got two Ethernet ports, and those are for connecting your S3 to your computer or to your network. Next to that, we have two USB ports, and those are dedicated for use with your computer keyboard and your computer mouse. Next to the USB ports is where we find our audio connections for the audio interface portion of the S3. We've got two XLR inputs and we've got two 1/4-inch balanced inputs. Next to those, two XLR outputs and two balanced 1/4-inch outputs. Rounding out the back panel, we have a connection for a set of headphones, and there is a volume control for the headphones here on the front edge of the S3. Below that, we have a connection for a foot switch, which you use for punching in and out on your software. And the final port on the back panel of the S3 is for the power supply. Now the S3 is very simple to connect to your computer. There's just one Ethernet cable that runs from the S3 to either your router or directly into your computer. It uses the Yukon protocol, so you just install the software. That shows up on your screen up here. You can click that to open it up, and then you have access to a variety of different settings. And we'll talk a bit more about that later. The great thing about the S3 is how integrated it is with your software. I'm using it here with Pro Tools, as I mentioned, and you really can take charge of everything that happens inside the software right from here on the control surface. Aside from naming tracks and a few other functions, you really don't have to access your keyboard or your mouse very much at all. When you launch your DAW with the S3 connected, the configuration is basically set up to be a channel strip that corresponds to what's happening inside your DAW. So if we start here, we've got our pan control, we've got a solo control, we've got a mute switch, we can select the track, we can record arm a track, and of course we have our track fader as well. But we also have access to many of the extended functions that normally you'd need to use your computer keyboard to get to. And that's because we have modifier keys right down here on the bottom of the S3. So we've got a command button, control button, an alt or option button, and a shift button. So I'll give you an example. In Pro Tools, when you hold down the option key or the alt key on your keyboard and you touch a control, it jumps to its default location. We can do the same thing with the S3 by holding down the alt key and, for example, touching the pan control. It immediately jumps to 0. We touch the fader, it does the exact same thing. It moves to its default location, which is 0 dB. Now beyond that, we also have arrow keys, and these are the same as the arrow keys that are on your computer keyboard. So if we're, for example, creating a new track in Pro Tools, we can use the modifiers to change our settings inside the dialog using the arrow keys, just as we would using the arrow keys and the modifier keys on our computer keyboard. So these kind of functions are very obvious, but they also make working with the S3 very fast and very intuitive because it replaces so much of what you do using the computer keyboard. We also have transport functions using the S3. We have a touch strip down here labeled 1 through 4, and those correspond to the different transport functions. For example, number 3 is playback. So we can start playback. We can also stop playback. We can also arm and record our tracks. So it's very easy to arm multiple tracks at once. We simply select the tracks that we want, hold the shift key, hit button number 4. We go into record mode, hit number 3, and we're recording. To stop recording, just hit 3 again. Now you'll also notice that we have meters here at the base of each of our channel faders, and that allows us to see what's happening. They correspond to the level meters that are inside your DAW software. Let's take a tour of some of the other functionality that's in the S3. Across the top, we have a control strip here that gives us access to different parameters of plugins or things that are happening on each of the channels. And we can access those using this bank of switches that are up here. You can page through those, you can go back on those, and you can bypass, for example, plugins. And I'll show you a little bit more on that later. The next bank of 6 switches allows us to access what's assigned to these 2 rows of channel encoders. So for example, right now I've got this assigned to pan. That gives us a pan control for each channel right here across this set of encoders. We can access both the mono channels here, and as it's set right now, when we go to one of the stereo tracks, we get the left side of the panner. If we hit the page button, now we're accessing the right side. and we can page back. The next bank of switches down here on the lower left give us access to custom fader layouts. Now these custom fader layouts let us assign exactly what tracks are assigned to exactly what faders. We do that using the Yukon software. There's a page up here in the Yukon settings that lets us assign the different tracks to each of the faders, and then we can save those as layouts. So let me give you some examples. When I push the A button here in this bank of switches, it calls up all my tracks arrayed across all the faders. And that's the way you'd normally be working with a control surface like this. But let's say I want to focus in on just the kick drum and the snare drum for a particular reason. I've created a layout inside Yukon. When I hit button B, it immediately jumps to just showing me the kick drum and the snare drum tracks. Similarly, I can hit C, and I've created a custom fader layout that just contains my two bass tracks, the bass DI and the amplifier track that was recorded with a microphone. And now I can see just those and focus right in on those. When I want to go back to all the tracks, just hit A. Now this is very flexible. It allows you to assign exactly what you want, so you can very quickly jump to just the tracks that you want to focus on. Rounding out this bank of switches, we've got an OK and a cancel button that allow us to work with dialogues inside the software, and the user button actually serves as a save button. So when that's illuminated, you've got changes inside the software. To save your session, just hit that twice. Moving to the upper right of the S3, this bank of switches allows us to choose, for example, plugins that are being assigned to each track. We'll take a look at that in a little bit. Next to that, we have our track controls, so we can nudge through our different tracks if we have more than will fit on the 16 faders in the S3. So we can move by one track at a time, or we can bank through banks of 16. The next bank of switches allows us to navigate within the software. The two view buttons allow us to move between memory location 1 and 2 in Pro Tools, for example. The workstation application switch lets us switch between different software workstations running on the same computer, and it also allows us on boot up to decide whether we're going to be working in a studio configuration or a live configuration with the S3. The next 8 keys allow us to choose what automation mode is assigned to each channel. So for example, if I hold down button 1 and select the first channel, it'll jump to automation write. And now I'm ready to write automation into my track. If I hold down 3, we'll go to automation touch mode. Automation 4 is automation off, actually. Automation 5 is automation latch. So you can choose all the different modes and work with those right from here. You can also multi-assign those, so you can work with all the tracks at once, or you can choose just a range of tracks and assign automation modes to those as well. But the S3 also allows us to access 8 different things for each channel. We can access inserts, the input setting, a dynamics processor, an EQ processor, sends for the channel, pan for the channel, group assignments for the channel, and the mix as well. So let's take a look at, for example, assigning a dynamics processor. It's very simple. Just click the dynamics knob. Whatever you've assigned as your favorite inside the Pro Tools preferences will come up as the dynamics plugin. Similarly, to access an EQ plugin, we just hit the EQ button. So we can immediately jump to whatever we've assigned as our favorite. Now to access the parameters for those two plugins, we just click the encoder again, and we immediately have the parameters laid out across our encoders. We can reach up, for example, and grab the ratio for our compressor, and adjust that very quickly and easily. But we're not limited to just our favorite EQ and compressor plugins. We can access any plugin that we want from right here on the S3. Just hit the Inserts encoder. Now press the config. Choose which insert we want to work with. We'll choose D here. And now we can choose from no insert, add a plugin. We can access an input and output, a hardware insert, or we can add again our favorite EQ or compressor. If we click plugin, now our choices are arrayed here right across the different encoders. So we could choose an EQ, a dynamics, whatever category we want to work with. So if we want to add a reverb, simply click that. Our available reverbs all show up. So we can choose Avid Reverb, and that will open up. And we can also access our parameters for that very quickly. If we go back to our inserts view, click the encoder, it'll open right up. And again, our parameters are arrayed right across the encoders. So we can work with those very quickly and easily. To bypass a plugin is very fast and easy with the S3 as well. If we're in inserts view, we can just hit the in button, and that will bypass whatever one we're working on. We can also hit the overall in button. It will bypass all 3 at once. Or if we're looking at an individual plugin with the parameters, we can hit the in button and bypass it there as well. So it's very easy to work with plugins inside of Pro Tools or your other DAWs using the S3. It's also very easy to work with sends using the S3. Simply click the sends encoder, click config, click whatever send you want to assign to. We'll choose C. Now we can choose to either route that to a bus internally in our DAW, or to a hardware output, or to have no send at all. We'll choose bus, and now our different busing options are available to us here. You can assign either a stereo bus or a mono bus. I'll choose bus 7 and 8. It's immediately assigned to the channel. Once we have the bus assigned, it's again easy to access that. We just click our sends encoder, choose bus 7 and 8 that shows up here. The window opens up, and for example, we've got control over pan, or for mute for that send right under our fingertips. A handy function of the S3 is that we can flip what's assigned to the faders. So for example, normally we've got our volume fader assigned to the faders, and then we've also got pan control assigned to our encoder here. If we hit the flip button, now we've got pan in our fader, and level control is here. And you can do that with other parameter assignments as well. And you can go still deeper with the S3. For example, you can work with groups inside of Pro Tools. If we hit the groups button, it comes up with the groups that are assigned inside of Pro Tools, and now we can make those groups either active, or we can disable them. We can also assign various tracks to those different groups. There's so much more you can do with the S3. It's deeply integrated using the Yukon protocol, so you can access so many parameters and so many different things inside your DAW software. You'll find that you're using your keyboard and your mouse very little, and you're really being hands-on with the S3 to take control over everything that's happening with your mix. I'd like to thank Avid for letting me get my hands on the S3 so early. It's not even shipping yet, and I've had about a week to spend with it here, and I have to tell you, I'm really enamored of this control surface. It really is easy to use, it looks great, it's compact, and yet gives you charge over a lot of different parameters and a lot of functionality. It's really a fun board to work on. Thanks for joining me for the premiere installment of Sweetwater SoundCheck. We've got a lot more great gear videos coming your way. I'm Mitch Gallagher.